Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on our journey and exploration through this recent release made by the Criterion collection early this year of 2020. And it is the Blu-ray box set called Essential Fellini. And I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on that film, which is set forth on the sixth disc number 6 of such set. And the film is from 1957, and it is called, in English, Knights of CABIRIA. From 1957, and the title in Italian, and please, once again, as per usual, please pardon me for my poor pronunciation of the language, but it is Le Notti di Cabiria, or in English, Knights of Cabiria. And this is another extraordinary masterpiece from the filmmaker Federico Fellini, and we should also point out the story credited to Fellini and also Flaiano and Pinelli, and these are names that we have seen in past cinema collaborations involving the works of Fellini, so this is also very important. We should also mention the involvement of Pierpaolo Pasolini, and I'll speak to that somewhat later in this video, and also Nino Rota and Piero Gherardi and Dino De Laurentiis. Also, we should not neglect, of course, the central performance by the great Giulietta Mazzina as Cabiria, who gives a powerful and so nuanced performance in the main character of Cabiria, and her characterization and the way that she is portrayed and documented and illuminated by the very means of the cinematic craft itself, I think is a testament to the power of an art form that is Fellini's world, and the character of Cabiria in particular, in the hands of the great performer and artist that is Giulietta Mazzina, is one of those breathtaking and iconic performances in the pantheon of cinema. So this is a very important aspect of the film, and I'll try my best to give reasons as to why. Now, as for those reasons, I think the best place to start would be to try to speak to what the film is more or less about in its plot or its story structure. And I think we can identify the focus on this particular character of Cabiria, as I say, played by Mazzina, and her life as a woman living alone and needing to work in order to make a living. And her work involves the world of prostitution. And so we have this episodic structure following her and her various encounters with her circle of friends, also her various nightlife adventures, and the personages that she meets along the way. Also, the situations involve a type of journey atmosphere or structure, a geographically based journey where she goes from place to place to place, but also an emotional one. And when I mean an emotional journey, I mean one where her journey is structured by the appearance of hopes and dreams and aspirations on the one hand, and disillusionment and disappointment and the harsh realities on the other. And we have this push and pull. We have this way that she, Cabiria, is essentially trying to make her way in this life given these various variables and circumstances that she needs to face in a given situation and circumstance, thus creating, I think, the environment and situationally based means to examine and to really get involved with this character of CABIRIA on a very emotional level, because we are with her. We are with her when she is excited and happy, and we are with her when she experiences defeat and disappointment. And my goodness, when it comes, it truly is something that has a true emotional wallop in the best possible sense of that phrase, in a form of cinematic poetry that is given great vivacious expression in the hands of Fellini and Masina and company. So we get a full range, I think, of an emotional journey as well as a physical or geographical journey. And I use also the word journey because this is something that is, I think, consistent in the world of Fellini's filmography as we have seen thus far. We have, for example, seen a type of journey person road structure in a lot of the plots that we have experienced in Fellini's films up to now, say Variety Lights or La Strada. Also, there is the episodic nature of the plot structure, and I think that recalls films like, say, I Vitelloni as well. Also, we have the use of cinematic juxtapositions and dualities, and we see this, I think, expressed so forcefully and with great confidence in the way that, say, themes and concerns that could be described as being, say, pious or religious related or religious based, are juxtaposed with what might be deemed to be the earthy or the carnal based. And I'm talking about scenes involving CABIRIA and religious environments or religious-based environments. And so in a very, I think, broad context, I think we can see this idea of faith and reality, or pious and carnal. And I use those phrases in a very general sense because I don't think they're totally disconnected or mutually exclusive. I think there is a very healthy sense of overlap in realistic terms between these two separate themes. However, I think for a general construct of a conversation or discussion vis-a-vis Fellini's works and the dynamism of the duality of certain themes, I think that kind of categorization is I think very convenient and appropriate, and so that's why I employ that language here. But the point I wanted to bring is that this dynamism of duality and juxtaposition also leads to various avenues of self-realization that the characters experience, I think, on a level of spirituality, on a level of morality, and also on a level of wanting to find some kind of satisfaction or happiness. And I think those feelings on a very fundamental emotional level, I think, can be said to be something akin to Fellini's camera capturing, again, the essence of the humanity of the characters. And I think in those terms, the dynamism of the duality thematic structure, I think, leads very nicely to the discussion or the expression of the essence of the character's humanities. So this is a very important aspect of this film, Nights of CABIRIA, and the way that Fellini's cinema is so well integrated into the specifics that is this particular film. So that's very important, I think. Also, to continue on with the notion of juxtaposition and duality and the dynamism of various seemingly opposite themes, we have also truth and fiction, or reality and dreams. And I mean this also on a very emotional level, because we have characters, CABIRIA, I think most primarily, dealing with ambitions and dreams and hopes that are generated through the various characters that they meet, in particular the relationships that we understand CABIRIA experiences throughout the course of the film. And so we know that CABIRIA has relationships, and how those relationships turn out end up becoming plot points, very landmark plot points in the film. So we see hopes suddenly confronted by situations of the harshness of reality. And we see this pattern emerge in various different maybe variants, of course, but maybe variations on a theme might be a good way to express it. And so that is, I think, another expression of the dynamism of the duality or juxtaposition, which is hope and dreams, and then reality and the harshness thereof on the other hand. And that is related to with truth and fiction, because the way in which these certain plot points of the relationships or that CABIRIA experiences in the film has a lot to do with what is the outward expression of a particular person versus what that particular person really is. So what we think someone is might not necessarily be who they actually are. And so this really goes into, again, what is real versus what is fake, what is truth versus what is artifice. And this is another dynamic duality that we have seen time and time again in Fellini's films, and I know that we will see this played out so much more in the films to come. So, but it's expressed here, and again, it's also expressed and anchored in this emotional way, because as this dynamism of this particular example of the duality is being expressed, we never lose sight of the emotional effect that this all has on the character of CABIRIA and what it is she goes through. And it is a very heartbreaking, emotionally powerful type of journey and exploration that occurs vis-a-vis this idea of truth and artifice. And I'm trying to be as ambiguous as possible, because I don't want to give too much away as far as the plot details, but suffice to say, it does lead to certain revelations and realizations that the characters involved do experience. And I think that always is anchored in an emotional experience, not just for the characters, but for us, the viewers, who are observing the world as it unfolds before our very eyes. So this is another way that the dynamism leads very directly to an emotional impact. And also, another very key juxtaposition, dynamic duality that takes place in this film, Nights of CABIRIA, is the notion of, or the notions of, humor and comedy on the one hand, and tragedy and sadness and melancholy on the other hand. Comedy and pathos coming together and being expressed in one bold cinematic brushstroke, in that magnificent poetic way that we have seen Fellini and company be able to achieve with such specificity and such warmth and such directness and such accessibility and universality that is truly breathtaking to behold. And I think if we were to try to express that, or to try to define or identify the best, or the one of the best ways that is expressed in this film, it would be in the character of CABIRIA herself, as played again by Giulietta Mazzina. This is one of the great performances of the ages. This is one where we see Mazzina and her physical capabilities. It is a physical role in terms of how she uses her bodily gestures, how she uses facial gestures, and the way that there is a certain sense in almost a performance-like way, little things in terms of gestures of the body and hand, or even certain slight contortions of her figure and the like. These express outwardly a kind of emotional journey, sometimes a turmoil type journey, other times an exhilaration based journey, but an emotional journey all the same. These outward expressions of her performance always mirror a type of emotional journey that the character is experiencing inside in her heart. So this is a wonderful performance on that level. But that's not all, because there are great moments of almost jubilant, triumphant, celebratory nature of the human expression. And this is made manifest in specific discoveries that CABIRIA makes along the way, self-reflexive discoveries as well, that lead to moments of shining hope and glory. And I think those are so triumphant and beautiful that we as viewers, as audience, cannot help but be touched. And we go along for the ride that is the emotional journey of CABIRIA herself. And when the moments of disappointment hit, they really hit. And they hit on a level that is very fundamentally painful and raw and sore. And but also we never lose sight, again, with Messina's performance as our guide, we never lose sight of the fact that there is always that sense of the lightness and the comic and the humorous and the joyous that can also be combined in those moments of defeat and melancholy and sadness. And there is something about the power of the smile as an exemplar of this. And I think the expression of this power of the smile is so, it's so iconically portrayed in many of the scenes, or in almost all the scenes that Messina is playing. She is at once sad and also expressing a sense of happiness in some degree or some form or another, crying and smiles. And I think that is such a beautiful image, and in many ways it represents the heart of what we see in the world of the cinema a la Fellini, the Fellini-esque world, as it were. Namely, the way that tragedy is combined with humor and comedy, how happiness and sadness, they are dualities, or that this is a type of dynamic duality juxtaposition. They might be said to be opposites, but still there is something integrated about them, and they are expressed often in many iconic moments in past Fellini films. But this film, Nights of Cabiria, has those moments, and it has them in the plot as it progresses forward. Also, it expresses them in the performances, and most prominently, of course, in the iconic role of Cabiria as played by the one, the only Giulietta Messina. It is, as I say, a performance for the ages, and it is made even more remarkable by the fact that it never loses sight of the emotional journey, the core warmth of the character. Again, happiness and sadness, tears and smiles, it is all here, and is expressed so vividly, so poetically, and so beautifully through this character, Giulietta Messina's performance as Cabiria in the film Nights of Cabiria. The film is one of my absolute favorites from Federico Fellini, and I'm so glad it is here in the Criterion Collection's Essential Fellini set. We have a beautiful presentation of this film. The restoration here looks clean and crisp and vivid, and it's a real marvel to behold, of a film that is itself a marvel to behold. I should point out, of course, that we did see it in a very early DVD, now out of print, spine number 49. This is Nights of Cabiria. This is from the late 1990s. And so at the time, this was a really big deal because of the fact that it was presenting a certain version of the film, and I'll get to that momentarily. So it is in many ways a classic Criterion release, and it was really great. But of course, it's now with the advent of developing physical media-based technologies, it is also wonderful to see the presentation of this film as included as part of this great set. Wonderful inclusion. So please check it out as part of the set if you're able to. And I should also say that the disc here includes a number of supplements as well that are worth checking out. They are great supplements. The first is a 52-minute or so documentary, which is called Giulietta Mazzina, The Power of a Smile by Sandro Lai. And this is really excellent. It is a type of documentary that could be said to be similar to something we saw in a previous supplement or disc supplement, which is called Federico Fellini's autobiography. And so we have footage, archival footage of Mazzina as she appeared in various interviews that she gave, or maybe television appearances where she was talking about certain films that were current at the time, or speaking about her television or film projects, her relationship with Fellini, and et cetera, et cetera. And so this is in essence, a compilation of various interviews that Mazzina gave over the course of her career. And I think it is so valuable as a living document, not just, of course, in the context of an exploration of Fellini's filmography, because it is that, undeniably, because of the key role that Giulietta Mazzina played, not just in the films of Fellini, but of course in the life of Fellini. And so this is one of those key relationships in the life of Fellini as we understand it, of course. So so this becomes, again, in the context of a discussion of the work of Fellini, very essential stuff. But that is not all, because we also have to remember, of course, right, that Mazzina is a legend, is a famous legend, and she has her career and work within the world of Fellini, but also beyond that, or outside the world of Fellini's films. And so this documentary is such a great way for us to keep that in mind in terms of the role of Mazzina in the landscape of cinema and Italian cinema, as well as in the landscape of the world of Fellini's films. And that's great because we do get, for example, some discussion of other non-Fellini works, and we see her talk about it, we see her excitement, we see the way that she is a natural performer. She's not just a brilliant actor, she is that, of course. She has this great way of expressing herself emotionally, and also she has this great physicality about her in terms of the way that she can sing, the way that she can dance, also the way that she can use her facial gestures and bodily movements in her dramatic performances. And so we see this, and we get a background into her training and her education leading up to her roles as an actor and performer, and also her meeting Federico Fellini. And the rest is, as they say, history. So this is great because we get a sense of Mazzina herself, and that, I think, is so wonderful and lovely and warm to be able to experience. And that is one of the reasons why this documentary is so essential. Going back to a discussion of this in the context of Fellini, I think this is also very essential because it really goes into some very sensitive and very personal topics about the relationship between Mazzina and Fellini. And one of the areas is there's a particular part where it goes very personal, and it almost has this way of allowing, well, let me take a step back. It goes into these areas where interviewers are asking very sensitive and personal questions to Mazzina about certain aspects of her relationship with Fellini. And it does go into these details, and there are certain participants that are shown or that are seen and speaking to us, the camera, or us, the audience, and they are essentially theorizing as to how certain events in the early lives of Fellini and Messina, how they may have shaped the professional life that was the working relationship, and also the personal relationship between Messina and Fellini going forward, and how much indeed Fellini depended so much on Messina for a type of emotional support, as well as professional support and a collaboration, an artistic one, with the various projects that they were involved in. And so it is all here. There is this real rich potential for a discussion, a very a multifaceted one. And so I recommend this wholeheartedly. Again, this is Giulietta Messina, The Power of a Smile. But that's not all, because we then get another episode of the Second Look program, the 1960 Second Look program. So we already saw in some of the past discs in the set the episodes, the earlier episodes involving of the Second Look program. And here we get what is the yes, it's the third episode, excuse me. And the third episode here is great because we have so many participants. Well, first we have the great Fellini, who is being his Fellini self when he's being interviewed. And he's very charming, he's very confident, and it's again, another marvel to behold. But we also get some discussion and some interviews with, for example, Pinelli. And as we know, Pinelli is one of the story collaborators that has worked with Fellini on a number of occasions. Please note that I think in the second episode, in a prior disc, we also got a brief appearance by Flaiano as well. So these are the two figures that figure in very prominently in the creative world of the Fellini cinema. So Pinelli appears here. Also, we get Messina, Giulietta Messina, being interviewed, and she is, I understand, speaking French, and so that is very impressive. And it's also, she is very expressive and so delightful, and so expressive and delightful, and also very open in her responses. So that is also a great thing. We also get a little bit from Pasolini. And I mentioned Pasolini earlier, and we have to remember that Pasolini was involved to a certain, I think, very significant degree in the writing of certain aspects of this film. And Pasolini does go into details as to what he was involved in and his working relationship with Fellini, and the idea being that Fellini, wanting to make this film about a certain aspect of life in Rome, the Roman society, as it were, and the nightlife that was involved here. These were things that it was felt that someone like Pasolini could perhaps capture in terms of the appropriate dialogue to be used, and also certain scene constructions. Pasolini had by this time become well known for his writing Ragazzi di Vita from the early 1950s or the mid 1950s, and so I think that inspired Fellini to want to work with Pasolini in order to help Fellini and Flaiano and Pinelli create this sense of the life in Rome, which is a very key component of this film. So that is Pasolini's involvement, and it's really great to see Pasolini being interviewed in this component of the Second Look program, and the like. And also there are other references and other people mentioned and appearing in this, and so we see of course discussions about Nino Rota, also Gherardi as well. So these are names that are very prominent in the world of Fellini, as we know, and we may see them appear again in discussions of future films. But that is the Second Look program, the third episode thereof, which is included as part of this disc. It's great to watch, recommended 100%, approximately 33 minutes. But then we get that part of the supplements which we could say is stuff that we saw in the earlier DVD from Criterion. So the first thing we get is Dominique Delouche. This is an interview with him from 1999, and if we recall, he was an assistant director or assistant to Fellini. We had a one-on-one interview with him actually included, if we recall, as part of the supplements to the earlier film Il Bedone. Now we have the interview that he had in 1999, which is also, as I say, found in the earlier DVD. It's interesting, incidentally, to compare the two. The interview that he did that's included for Il Bedone, which is a little bit later, by the way, the interview that is, versus the earlier interview here from the late 90s that is included with the Knights of CABIRIA disc. So it's interesting to compare the two interviews themselves. But here in this interview, Dominique Delouche talks about the relationship, for example, between Fellini and Luchino Visconti. He also talks about he being able to work on the set whenever there was a French actor involved. So he mentions, for example, Anouk Aimée. Also, in the context of Knights of Cabiria, of course, there's François Perrier, who plays a very key role in the film. And so Delouche here in this interview speaks about working with François Perrier and also being on the set and Fellini's working relationship. So that's also very exciting, very interesting and fascinating. Delouche also talks about Pasolini, and which is what we were referring to earlier in the Second Look program, but he mentions about why it felt that Pasolini could bring something of an authenticity of the Roman life to the film due to, among other things, the Ragazzi di Vita. So that explains the reason why Fellini wanted Pasolini involved. Also, Delouche speaks about the situation involving the various versions of the film Knights of Cabiria, specifically with respect to what he refers to, or what's known colloquially as the man with the sack sequence of the film. As some of you may know, this film was made with a certain running time length, and part of that included a sequence involving a man, what's referred to as the man in the sack sequence. But then Dino De Laurentiis, who is the producer, felt that it was better to take that sequence out and to excise it. And so a version of the film Knights of Cabiria existed without such sequence. But then when Criterion came along and when it was re-released, the film was re-released in the late 90s and then later released by Criterion on this DVD, that sequence was reinstated into the film. And so that is this version that we have for this DVD release back in the late 90s, which coincided with the theatrical re-release of the film. And then we have the same version, which is now included, my understanding is included here with the Essential Fellini Blu-ray. But Delouche in the interview does speak to his understanding as to why these versions existed, and also he makes reference to the Catholic Church as well. Although we should then point to the next supplement, which is an audio excerpt interview with Dino De Laurentiis himself, and this is approximately 3 minutes, and he speaks in this excerpt specifically about why it was that the so-called man in the sack sequence was excised from the film and the circumstances around that, and then what the circumstances later were for Federico Fellini to want to have the footage reinstated into the film and what led to that. So that's the Dino De Laurentiis excerpted interview, which is another supplement here, which is also taken from the DVD. The interview is such that you get the words from De Laurentiis, you can hear them, but then you also get the actual text of what it is he's saying in English on the screen as you watch it. So that's an interesting bit of background that we get, as I say, from the Delouche interview, and then later with the De Laurentiis excerpt interview, both of which can also be found on the earlier DVD. And then we have the original theatrical trailer, and then the re-release trailer, which I understand was circa 1998. So that rounds out the supplements found on the disc. I should point out that, just for your information, in case you're interested, the earlier Criterion DVD also had what was known as a restoration demonstration. Also, it had an excerpt from the film, The White Sheik, which is the earlier Federico Fellini film. And this excerpt is important because this excerpt showed the part of the film, The White Sheik, where in fact Giulietta Messina appears in that film as CABIRIA. And so it's an interesting earlier reference point in an earlier Federico Fellini film, and it's captured in an excerpt form as part of the supplements package for the earlier DVD. There is no such excerpt of The White Sheik, as far as I understand it, as part of this Knights of CABIRIA disc that is part of the Essential Fellini set. However, of course, we have the film The White Sheik, which is the second disc on the same set. So if you want to find the reference point, you can always refer to the film itself with its own Blu-ray disc, as I say, in the same set. So there's that. Also, I should point out that my understanding is that the Blu-ray does not feature the option of watching the film with an English dub soundtrack, whereas the earlier DVD actually had the option of listening to the film or watching the film with the English soundtrack. So that's something, in case you're interested in watching, that might be a reason to try to get a copy of the earlier DVD. But I think that for many people, the Italian language will not only suffice, but will perhaps be the definitive way to experience the film Le Notti di Cabiria, or Knights of Cabiria. And I would say that that is a very reasonable position to take. So I think having the film as it's presented here by Criterion in this new Blu-ray set is appropriate and also very reasonable, and it's a great way to experience the film Knights of Cabiria. Okay, so I think that is it as far as the supplements go, and I think this therefore is another great example of Fellini's craft and art. And it's not just Fellini, of course. We have many people working here, and of course the central performance by Messina, again, an iconic performance, an iconic role. And we should never forget also that this has a very significant place in Fellini's filmography, because it does, as I say, have this sense of duality and dynamism. It also continues that conversation about how much push and pull there is between Fellini and the traditions of Italian neorealism. Because, as I say, on the one hand, this could be said to be, I think, a really a close maybe approximation, if you will, or a cinematic expression of a film that has, I think, some pretty arguably strong ties with Italian neorealism in terms of a depiction of a certain class of society. Because if we remember, if we think about Cabiria and where she is in society, I think we can find certain thematic connections with Italian neorealism traditions. At the same time, it is also expressing sort of inward introspection, which might be said to be leaning maybe more towards a human drama that is in the realm of the world of Fellini. So I think this is another type of discussion that is still ongoing and continuing, and it's something that we have seen ongoing and continuing in Fellini's past films of this period. So this is another great example of the way in which this figures in so consistently in the body of Fellini's work on the one hand, and it also charts a path forward in the way that we will see so boldly defined and forged by Fellini and company in the films to follow. But here we have yet another brilliant, triumphant artistic expression of the cinema of Federico Fellini. This is Knights of Cabiria. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.